How do you start off a 10-book epic fantasy series? Well, it's real easy. You do a 1,001 page hardcover to kick things off. Let's take a look at The Way of Kings. The purpose of a storyteller is not to tell you how to think, but to give you questions to think upon. We follow the codes not because they bring gain, but because we loathe the people we would otherwise become. Those who truly seek wisdom are those who will acknowledge the virtue in their adversaries and who will learn from those who disabuse them of error. Strength does not make one capable of rule, it makes one capable of service. Sometimes, the prize is not worth the costs. The means by which we achieve victory are as important as the victory itself. And so, does the destination matter, or is it the path we take? I declare that no accomplishment has substance nearly as great as the road used to achieve it. We are not creatures of destinations. It is the journey that shapes us. Our calloused feet, our backs strong from carrying the weight of our travels, our eyes open with the fresh delight of experience lived. In the end, all men die. How you lived will be far more important to the Almighty than what you accomplished. Sometimes we find it hardest to accept in others that which we cling to in ourselves. Hey, what's up, bookworms and knights? Radiant Mike back again as Stormlight September rolls on, and we're talking book number 1 today of the Stormlight archive, and that is The Way of Kings by Brandon Sanderson. This, you don't even need free weights with these books. You just get your exercise in like that. So this is going to be a non-spoiler review of The Way of Kings. Now, if you need a little bit more of a sales pitch, I did do my Why You Should Read the Stormlight Archive video right there. I think that's more of what you're looking for if you're undecided on the series. Maybe if you just need a little bit more of a push, I'm going to do the non-spoiler book review for all this. I am going to be doing spoiler talk, not spoiler reviews or spoiler recaps or spoiler summaries. I'll be doing some spoiler talk. I'm going to launch that at the same exact time I drop this video, so don't stress about it. I will have it up the same time that this video is up. So as soon as you're done watching this one and you want to know some spoilers and you want to talk about spoilers, it'll be there waiting to go for you. But again, this is the first book in a planned 10-book series consisting of 2 5-book arcs. And this first book, man, it is a beast. I mean, look at that. 1,001 pages on hardcover for your first book in your epic fantasy series. Only Brandon Sanderson, I think, can get away with stuff like this, right? But let's do as we always do, guys. The traditional format of this is to talk about what makes it good or bad, why you should read it, but we start with what is it about. According to mythology, mankind used to live in the Tranquiline Halls, heaven. But the Voidbringers then captured heaven, casting out gods and men took root on Roshar, the world of storms, and then the Voidbringers followed. They came against men 10,000 times, and to help them cope, the Almighty gave men powerful suits of armor and mystical weapons known as shard blades. Led by 10 angelic heralds and 10 orders of knights known as Radiants, mankind finally won. Today, the only remnants of those supposed battles are the shard blades, the possession of which makes man nearly invincible on the battlefield. The entire world is at war with itself and has been for centuries since the Radiants turned against mankind. Kings strive to win more shard blades, each secretly wishing to be the one who will finally unite all of mankind under a single throne. On a world scoured down to the rock by terrifying hurricanes that blow through every few days, a young spearman is forced into the army of a shard bearer, led to war against an enemy he doesn't understand and a war he doesn't really fight. And that leads us into The Way of Kings. Let's do what we always do, guys, and that is go into what makes it good or bad. Now, I like to start with the good, and yes, I'm going to give you a spoiler here in that most of this is going to be good. The characters are obviously going to be my #1 answer. The characters in this are not your standard traditional fantasy fare, right? This isn't your, I'm completely the side of light and I'm completely the side of evil. It has damaged characters that are so much not like your usual traditional fantasy that I feel like it's weird to call this traditional fantasy because, yes, I don't really know where else to put it. It's just epic fantasy. It does have a lot of traditional roots in it, but I think that these characters are different and unique enough that that's what makes this series really special. And it's just unusual for fantasy to have protagonists that are this damaged, and they aren't really that heroic, at least not from the get-go. Now, a lot of stories have the coming of age, the character arcs, obviously, but with this, it's just you start off with your 4 main POV characters in the story, and you're just like, I don't think any one of these are anything similar to another story out there that I've read, because, like I said, damage is the word that I use a lot with these characters, because there's problems with all 4 of them, and just about none of them are noble, from the beginning. So it's very, very interesting how that works. And you have 4 POV characters in this, but it's mostly 3. Yes, there is one character that has POV chapters, but it's very, very limited. It's mostly, I believe, if I recall correctly, the prologue and the interludes are mostly that character. The rest revolve around the 3 main characters, Kaladin, Shallan Navar, and Dalinar Kholin. And we're going to kind of talk about each one of those here and what makes them really special, because the arcs for each of these 3 main characters are incredible. I mean, you look at the book's length and you think, okay, well, it's not really unbelievable that he has full character arcs for all 3 of these characters, but the way that he does it is just magnificent. And I'm going to talk about each one a little bit here and kind of what makes them unique. Kaladin, you're thinking it's a traditional farm boy leaves home story because most of his backstory is told in this book through a series of flashbacks. It doesn't start with him, leaving the farm or whatever you want to put it. But those traditional tropes that you're used to, they get uprooted really quickly, and Kaladin finds himself in a rather upsetting situation that I really didn't expect to get this early. Lots of gladiator kind of vibes in it, but not quite. It isn't just straight like, okay, well, hey, I read Ben-Hur too. It's nothing like that. It has that feeling to it. Anytime you have the situation that he's thrust into, that's kind of what I'm going to go to as I think about Ben-Hur or Gladiator, something like that. But it's really well done, and just seeing him grow into a leader and basically a reluctant hero over the course of this book is just beautifully done. And I don't think that there's anyone, if you stick with it, that's not going to be in love with the character by those final pages. And again, that's just what the Lord Ruler does, guys. He makes you care about everyone. Let's go on to I say we don't get the hero's journey in this, I believe, but we do, just not in the normal Joseph Campbellian nature here with Kaladin. But Shallan starts off the story with pretty bad intentions, and that rather surprised me. Along the way, she kind of finds out what she is and is not capable of, and gets a new wrinkle of something that she would have never expected that she was able to do. But really, her basically being like the long con in this book is something that I absolutely love, because I think it ratchets up the tension to levels that you don't usually get, especially in a fantasy tale like this. So I love the, oh my God, is she going to get caught kind of feeling that this whole book has with her. And yeah, like I said, so you got 2 characters here right away to like, well, I don't see either one of these characters being really necessarily heroic. They seem like one is kind of trying to figure out what he's going to do with his life, and another one that's like, well, don't seem like a very good person, but you kind of understand why she's doing what she's doing, even if you might think, okay, well, I don't know if that's necessarily the answer, but when it comes to family, what won't you do? And then we got my favorite, and that is my man Dalinar Kholin. Now, he is an aging warrior high prince with kind of a dark past, and he's trying to be better. He's trying to be better. He's trying to unite the kingdoms here. It's one of those kind of things that I like, where you've got the guy who's made a ton of mistakes, and he knows this, but he's trying to be better with his life and make up for that time that he feels like he's lost. while also trying to hold his family together. Now he suffers from visions that could or could not be, madness. Is he getting this stuff from a higher power? Is he just simply going insane in his old age? You as the reader, you're not even sure. And I think that's what makes his POV chapters some of my most favorite. And he just has this moment, which I'll talk about in spoilers, that just made this easily one of my favorite characters in fantasy. And it is not one, if you told me, you gave me a synopsis of what this character was about before I started, I would have never thought that. I've been like, that sounds stupid. It's not stupid. It's really, really great. Now, for the other character, Seth, he's an assassin that may or may not be controlled by he might be being controlled by a puppet master of some sort. At least that's what you're kind of led to believe. And do you get those answers? Well, I'm never going to tell. But he's very unique in that you start off the book in his eyes. You're first introduced to this world in his eyes, and it's just Brandon is throwing all of these terms and fighting styles and stuff at you, and you're like, I have no idea what's going on right now, but it's amazing. This prologue will really just kick your ass. And I think it starts because Seth is just a really, really bad man at the beginning of this. I mean, bad man as in like he will mess you up and he won't even wait to ask you how you feel about it. So yeah, a very, very cool character. I like the way that he keeps him mysterious in this book. Gives you a little bit here, a little bit there, gives you a kind of a big answer towards the end, but there's still lots of mystery surrounding this character headed into book 2, but it's a very, very good start. But then you got all your side characters that are really great. Yasna, Adolin, Renarin, Navani, Sylphrena, all of the Bridge 4 crew that are all given time to breathe and develop their characters in a way that most side stories don't. I mean, I think there's hundreds of characters here, and I never feel like any of them are just like, I don't even need to worry about that name again. I mean, you got this Bridge 4 crew where every character could, with a lesser writer, every character could seem the same, recyclable, and they all have like unique personalities, and in a way that who is who right away just by reading the dialogue. It's just so well done, and I mean that Bridge 4 crew is just so lovable. It's impossible not to fall in love with that group. And you got a badass character like Yasna, who's just different than just about any other type of scholar that I've seen in one of these type of books before. Adolin, yeah, I'm gonna get into him in spoilers. Then you got Wit. Wit is someone that if you can figure out who he is, you would be quite familiar with this through the Cosmere. And I'll talk about Sylphrena a little bit later. Let's get into the universe here. You get the idea that this book is setting up just this huge world. It just feels lived in. I think that's what I tried to get across in that why you should read that I didn't. When I said like his world building was so huge that you wanted to know more, you get the idea that this world is so lived in that there is this huge history that I felt like you haven't really gotten except for like Tolkien. I feel like he was the one that was like, okay, I'm hearing stuff about thousands of years ago, not just like, hey, remember 20 years ago when this war happened? It was so deep and rich in its lore and history, and I feel like this does the same thing in a way, but it doesn't give you those answers. You just kind of hear about myths and legends and you want to know more, but you really do believe just in the way that these characters talk to each other. It's not crazy info dumps or anything like that, which is amazing in a book this long. That's not just crazy info dumps. It really does build up his universe, and you really want to know more about it. Really, I guess I'd say the more you hear about it, the more you want to know what went wrong here, what made these knights walk away. That's the biggest mystery throughout this whole book. The magic in this, it is interesting. I'll put it there. When you got a Sanderson book, the investiture is going to be something different, something unusual, and something that has a bit of a learning curve to it. Now, it embraces the 10 forces of nature, which include like illumination, transformation, abrasion, things like that. I couldn't tell you what all of them were the first time I read this book. I read this book in about just over a week, I think, when I first discovered it. Read it right after Mistborn. And to me, I was like, I've gotten so used to learning the ins and outs of allomancy that I'm not really sure I do understand. Now, like I said, I feel like at the end of this first book, I think that there's still questions you have about this magic system that that aren't really answered. But it's nothing that I think takes away. It's just because his magic systems are always so vast that there's going to be some things that you get right away and some things you still have questions about. And this one, I definitely do, because surge binding can get quite a little confusing at times, but again, not in a way that takes you out of the story. Let me just say, the Spren. The Spren are what I think makes this world truly fantastical. Basically, imagine all those little emoticons and emojis you use on your phone. Imagine those just like popping up all over the place. That's kind of what I put it to. It reads almost like these are like, magical fairies floating around or something like that. Like, hey, it's Tinkerbell. The whole time you're thinking something like that. But it's one of those things where like people either just completely ignore these things, or I don't know. It's really wild in the way that Sanderson writes it. Like I'm thinking, okay, this is something that can never be like, I know Brandon Sanderson really is fighting hard to get live action adaptations of the story. He doesn't want to do anime or animation, and I'm like, I think this is absolutely 100% an anime, because the second that you had a serious moment in the story, and then there's a pain spren or an anger spren or a love spren popping up, I mean, the audience is just going to laugh. It's going to be hilarious. There's someone with one of our main characters almost the whole story, Sylphrena, that is very much a character that represents what the spren are and what brings them to life, and it's very unusual. And I will honestly say that it might be the kind of thing that will lose some non-crazy fantasy readers. They might think, okay, this is just way too cheesy. So that one, your mileage might vary on that one, I think. But the Spren are unusual. Just know that there's more to them than just, hey, there are silly little bugs flying around. There's way more to it than that. But again, at first, it might seem a little jarring. Let's talk about the bad, if there is a bad. This isn't a bad to me, but it's going to be a bad to a lot of readers I've talked to who've read it recently. This is a big book, and it is a slow burn. What I say about Sanderson is he rewards his readers for sticking with his story. We all know about the Sanderlanche. Yes, it's all here, but here's the thing. There were numerous times when I was reading this the first time that I was like, okay, Kaladin's story needs to go somewhere, or I'm going to check out on this, because it is very slow. It is very depressing at points, and you're wondering what's going to happen. And it isn't until like page 400 that you're like, oh, hey, things are heating up. That's really how it feels. It is very, very slow introduction, but it's worth it. I mean, this is a huge world that he is introducing you to right up front. So it takes some time to get going. So just expect some patience is going to be required here. Another one, I think it might seem a little overwhelming at first. I talked about that prologue where he throws you into the middle of a situation. You don't know what's going on. There's all this terminology and all this magic you're not going to understand. That's normal. You're going to feel that way. You will get your answers. Just know up front, you're supposed to be confused at the beginning. Look at the prologue to Wheel of Time, the first book in Eye of the World. That prologue, you're like, yeah, it's just like that, where you're just like, I have no idea what's going on. I have no idea what this magic system is. That's okay. You'll be fine. Just know that you might feel a little overwhelmed at first. I guess a bad would be, it might be a tad over long. I say that it's all worth it, but at 1,001 pages on hardcover, I don't even know how they put this sucker on paperback. And it wasn't 2 paperbacks. I think that there are parts that probably could have been sped up, I think, but I also think that it's very rewarding in that there are no characters where you're like, I wish I'd gotten a little more detail on this. You never once say, I wish I'd gotten more detail. He gives you all the details, but there are those times where I'm like, all right, well, it took 13 chapters for Kaladin to do this. Probably could have done it in 7. It might feel like that sometimes. It really might. So all I have to say is treat this book like I said, treat The Stand by Stephen King, in that just accept it's not a race. There's no time limit. It's just something you're going to be reading for a while, and you just need to accept it. That's my advice going into this whole series. Not a race. Take your time. chew your food. It's good for you. Let's get into why you guys should read it. Now look, I think most of you already have, all right? This has 300,000 ratings on Goodreads, 20,000 reviews. I think it's sitting at like 4.6 out of 5. It's a very, very popular book. I don't think I really need to convince you to read it because, like I said, most of you probably already have if you're watching this channel. So I really don't know what else I could say to really convince you to read it. But I mean, if you need, I'm going to go back to what I said in the last one, is if you need something to scratch that Wheel of Time itch, you're done with Wheel of Time, you feel like nothing will ever compare to it, you want a similar, very rich world from a very similar writer, I think that this is going to be the medicine that you're looking for. So that, again, if you're a Wheel of Time veteran and you haven't read this yet, this is what you're looking for. Also, obviously, if you are invested in the Cosmere and you want to keep going, you're ready for that next level of Brandon Sanderson stuff, this is the way to go. I got a couple of final thoughts here. Look, this is an extremely popular book for a reason. It is very good. It is wonderfully crafted. It is well written. It has some of the best character development that I've seen in modern fantasy. There's a reason it is held in such high regard. I got it on the very first shelf of my bookshelf up there. While it starts slow, I mean, you're going to be surprised how fast those pages can fly by if you want them to. Like I said, I just told you to pace yourself and take your time. But I mean, it's hard for me to say when I read this in like 8 or 9 days when I first got it, you know? So I recommend taking your time. Just understand that this is an incredible book one of a huge series. You know, you're going to get, I feel like you get a good enough story in this. It's not like a humongous cliffhanger or anything, but you're left wanting more. So I'm amazed that he was able to aim this high with his first book in the series. It just shows the ambition that this man has. And I mean, from what I understand, when he releases, he said, oh yeah, it's going to be book number 1 of 10. And he comes to the editor with something that looks like this. That's balls. You know, that just shows how much stroke he had after Wheel of Time and after Mistborn, that he could convince his editor to do this. And they only get longer. That's the crazy thing about it. So look for the spoiler talk next. Like I said, it's not going to be beat by beat reviews like it was with the Wheel of Time stuff or the Dresden Files. It's just me kind of opening up a forum to talk about spoilers. So drop in the comments, guys. Tell me what you thought about Way of Kings. Like I said, let's keep the spoiler talk to a minimum here, and I'll be posting that next video of the spoiler talk. That one is no holds barred, free for all. We're going to talk about it, and I want to talk to you guys in the comments in this one and that one. So guys, hit me there, and I'll talk to you then.